Alright, hey guys, welcome to another video. Today, it is Thursday. Thursday has become a reoccurring day for me to make videos because it's usually a day where I either have a shorter shift of work or I have off. This week I just felt inspired to talk a little bit about the books I've read so far this year, at least my favorite ones. Gandalf wants to join us. Candy? Okay. She's in a very affectionate mood and doesn't want to be left alone. She's scared of candles, though. I also want to explain that this is probably this is the first year that I've really tried to become a reader. Last year I probably read a total of 15 books at the most. But this year my goal is 50, which is, of course, way more than I've ever read in a year or at all. I love reading, but it's been more of a very occasional hobby for me the past few years. I've read a lot of random mystery novels and stuff. Last year I read Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen, which I really, really loved. So obviously I wanted to further my reading of her, but obviously she has only a few novels, so I don't want to read them all too fast. But I read Persuasion in January, which was incredible. I really, really love this book. One thing I absolutely adore about Jane Austen books is the fact that I'm a very awkward and shy person and struggle to converse with a lot of different people. Makes these books incredibly interesting to me because she's so good at writing conversations and between like so many different characters. It's just so interesting to me how she writes, how she understands humans and socializing so well that she is able to write all these different relationships, all these different people, and how they all react to one another and how they talk to one another. And you know, she really makes you feel like you get to know every single character and sort of who they are and how they're feeling and what's going on inside of them, not only outside of them. Candy, oh my gosh. She started her tail on fire, for gosh sake. You okay? You okay? She's so dumb. Okay, that was my bad. You know what? I'm blowing this out. Besides my cat trying to kill herself, yeah, Persuasion was... I'm not going to say it's my favorite of her books. I preferred it to Pride and Prejudice. I think Sense and Sensibility is still my favorite, but I really loved the romance in this book. Like, compared to some of the other romances in the books, this one felt very unique and special, and I really loved the build-up of it throughout the story, and it was a very satisfying ending, I suppose. But that's sort of a trope with Jane Austen. She always has like very happy endings, which is a nice thing to have in a story. So definitely a 5-star book for me. I'm excited to read it again at some point when my mind needs the refreshing of it. I'm not going to talk too much about Tolkien books because I go a bit far. But for Christmas I got this book, which I was not expecting to get, but I got The Fall of Numenor, which is a Tolkien book which I really, really enjoyed. It just goes into a lot of detail and consistent. It's a consistently written narrative. A lot of Tolkien books, at least posthumously published ones, are just sort of fragments of different things and different information. They're not just one cohesive story because that's how he left his writings, not in a cohesive form, and they had to be formed after his death. So this one was just a collection of all his final writings about the realm of Numenor, basically put into one cohesive story, which was really nice to be able to just read through and not have to focus on all the various annotations and stuff like that. It's one of the easier reads outside of Lord of the Rings, but I'm currently reading, as I have said in the prior video, Good Wives, second part of Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I'm about halfway through this book. It's been a little bit of a slow read because I haven't had time. I've been too overwhelmed. But I'm incredibly, thoroughly enjoying this book. I read the first, half of Little Women last year, but then I finished the rest of it this year. and that was obviously an incredible book, a classic. I love the general theming behind it all, and the message it's sending about living a simple life of love between your friends and your family. And yeah, it's such an incredible book, and it makes you care so much about the family and feel like you're part of that whole world. So I really enjoyed reading the second part, obviously, and I'm excited to keep continuing through it until you get to the big moments in it, of course. But it's such a good book, even for like guidance in growing up and going into the world and making very large decisions. It's a very the book has a lot of wisdom. The only Charles Dickens work I've ever read is A Christmas Carol, which obviously I love. That's a classic. But I decided to read more of his work, so I started with Hard Times because it was on our shelf. This book was a roller coaster. I mean, I didn't really know what to expect. Charles Dickens obviously is a very... His books have sort of a very melancholic air about them. There's a lot of harshness and a lot of harsh truth in it, I suppose. They deal with a lot of very human characters and lots of unlikable characters, very flawed people, very strong personalities. But for that reason, I really love books like that go very into characters and especially dealing with their flaws and and sort of redeeming them in the end. But yeah, it was kind of a dark book. It sort of had sort of a dark atmosphere through a lot of it. Mr. Gradgrind is one of the main characters in the story, and he's sort of a very high-principled, stubborn, prideful, not very likable man who's a father to these children, and he raises them very strictly and without a lot of love. Lives led by principle and logic and truth, rather than letting his kids use their imagination and have fun and show how much he loves them by more simple, impractical means. I don't know what I'm talking about. But I actually really liked his character throughout the whole book, even though he's kind of a mean father and not a very good person. I actually really sort of liked his character the whole time. There's something underlying about him that you just know that underneath it all, he's actually a very loving and kind person just waiting to be unleashed. And that's sort of, spoiler alert, sort of what happens to him in the end, which was my favorite part about the book, I think, was his transformation, because of his daughter in the end teaches him of the error in his ways, and he sort of just doesn't know what to do. His whole life turns completely upside down, sort of, and he redeems himself. And I really enjoyed that. And I love old books. I love the old language and the atmosphere, even though it's sort of a depressing, not a very uplifting place that they're in throughout the whole story. But anyways, very nice. It's a very nice story. I really love the lessons that it teaches you in the end. Again, it really makes you, the more flawed the characters are, it kind of makes you fall in love with them even more. And there's lots of flawed characters in this. So, of course, that always really should be the case, because all humans are very flawed. So, okay, anyways, I'm going to ramble on so long about all this nonsense. I got this book, I got the Silmarillion, this copy for Christmas, which I asked for, which I just wanted this copy so badly, and I just finished this like last week, which obviously the Silmarillion is an incredible favorite of mine. And people always look at this book as if it's some like incredibly hard thing to read. I don't really understand it anymore. I suppose I used to, because it used to be kind of intimidating. It's actually it's so simple for me now, but perhaps it's just because I'm so used to the style of writing and the material being written that it's just sort of a simple thing to read through. in a sense, but I understand why it's so intimidating to people at the start, and it's mainly because Tolkien's not really that complicated of a writer, but he just, his world is so rich with history, and there's so many characters and genealogies and family trees that it's sort of overwhelming, because there's so many names, so many people you have to remember, and so many similar names, so it gets very confusing in the sense of, you know, who is who related to who else and all that stuff. And there's so many different groups of the different elves and men and dwarves, so it's like, who is who? I understand how that gets confusing, but the more you read it, the more familiar you get with the families and the characters, and the more easy it is to place them. And he also talks about, you know, he created this whole world geographically, so he talks about all these different places and the relation between them all, and that can also get very confusing, but I tend to try to read it and look at the map as he's describing different places, and then I get more familiar with where everything is. But anyways, as I said, I could ramble about this a long time. And lastly, I already talked, I've already mentioned I've read pretty much all this stuff, but I just read Emma. I finished it last week, and every Jane Austen book is very unique. I have to give her that. Each one is equally as enjoyable to read, and equally as interesting, and each one has very unique characters and unique settings and situations, and I really, really enjoyed reading this. Obviously, I always enjoyed reading Jane Austen. I think the fact that this book is a little bit longer than some of the other ones made me enjoy it almost even more, because I got to embark longer on this story and get more immersed in it. But yeah, I also really like how the main character, Emma, is she's quite a flawed person. As I've been saying, obviously most people in books and all the time are flawed, but like most of the time the main character is not exactly someone who's doing a lot of wrong things or doesn't really need to be redeemed that much. It's more about bad things happening to them and then them getting their happiness in the end. But it's more about learning her flaws and then being able to be happy in the end by being humbled, I guess. And I really enjoyed that. Because in a lot of the book, I didn't even find her that likable of a person, but nevertheless, that kind of interests you all the more, and then when you get to the end, it's very satisfying. Yeah, just a very joyful, uplifting book, and I love the atmosphere and the world that Jane Austen portrays in that time of life in England, in those sort of societies. It's very interesting. But yeah, I'm trying not to read too many classic books so that I don't just go through them all, but I've also been reading a lot of books, as you would know if you've seen my previous few videos, so I'm trying to just focus more on one book, so I'm going to focus on finishing this, and I'm also trying to read some religious books for Lent, which I'm going to read also as well at the same time, so that I have both to balance each other. I just finished one, which was very good, A Right to Be Merry by Sister Mary Frances. It's about the life of the Poor Clares, which is a religious order founded by St. Clare of Assisi, and it was a very interesting book, very joyful and uplifting, and I really enjoyed it, and now I'm reading another one. But anyways, yeah, that's it for this week, and I don't think anyone cares about my ramblings about books, but I just thought it would be an interesting idea to share with you my thoughts on books, because I don't ever really talk about them, so, might as well get them out of my head. And my friend Rachel also encouraged me to start doing more book content, so I felt inspired to do so. Check out her channel, by the way. I will link it in the description. She has an incredible channel. Anyways, I'll see you next week.